You cannot be a Donald Trump fan and a Wicked fan. In fact, I think if you voted for Donald Trump in 2024, you shouldn't even be allowed to see it in theaters, and you shouldn't be allowed to see any of the stage shows around the world.
And now it's time for Brad versus TikTok, my daily segment where I take on the craziest ideas from the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slugs.
Today, this woke TikToker's take on Wicked is kinda unhinged.
You cannot be a Donald Trump fan and a Wicked fan. In fact, I think if you voted for Donald Trump in 2024, you shouldn't even be allowed to see it in theaters, and you shouldn't be allowed to see any of the stage shows around the world.
Oh? So now we're advocating for political segregation and banning certain groups of people from accessing certain spaces or participating in certain walks of life. Babe, you might have missed the message of Wicked a little bit there.
So the actual conflict in Wicked is not about Elphaba being a witch, and it's not that she's green. The actual conflict is that the government of Oz is taking away rights from animals who previously had rights to do things like speak and have jobs. And Elphaba learns about this through one of her professors, who's a goat, and he starts hearing stories from other friends who are losing their ability and their right to speak. Now, Elphaba, like most people in Oz, has believed the propaganda that the wizard is good and he wants to help people and he cares, until she meets the wizard, realizes that he's a con man turned wannabe dictator. Sound familiar? He is the one taking rights away from animals, and he wants her to use her powers for bad because she is a witch and she is quite powerful. Elphaba becomes an activist. She's in opposition to the wizard. Okay, she's setting animals free. She's trying to save more animals. That is why she's labeled as wicked. The wizard essentially runs this big PR campaign to call her wicked so that people think that she is the evil one, when in reality, it's the wizard all along, because propaganda works. It's also really easy for him to convince the people of Oz that she's wicked because of the color of her skin. Imagine a world where a con man convinces people he cares about them and then slowly takes rights away from groups that previously had those rights. Pretty hard to believe.
Okay, there's so much to unpack here. First and foremost, I do agree, and I just saw the movie last night, and I actually did like it, that the movie Wicked, and I've seen the musical as well before it, has a political message. And that political message is one about the perils and dangers of authoritarianism and discrimination. But if you believe that message maps onto Trump, and I don't, which I'll get into, but if you believe that it does and that Trump is the new Hitler or whatever, shouldn't you want Trump supporters to see it and hopefully absorb the message and see the error of their ways? If you were actually trying to make the world a better place or have a positive impact, and if you actually had genuine concern about these issues rather than virtue signaling and TikTok trolling for clout, you would want Trump supporters to be exposed to that message and hopefully change their minds. You wouldn't be advocating for banning them from the theater. And I'm sorry, but if you think these warnings can only be applied to Trump and not the Democrats, you're delusional. The Biden-Harris administration literally tried to launch an Orwellian-sounding disinformation governance board and was exposed for extensively pressuring the social media companies to take down Americans' speech. When it comes to censoring people, the Democrats have done plenty of that. And as far as taking away people's jobs, am I the only one old enough to remember when the Biden-Harris administration pushed a vaccine mandate that forced many people out of their jobs? And it's kind of bizarre to talk about a situation where the political leader controls all the media and kind of has this propaganda network and compare that to a Republican president. Because while Trump does have his sycophantic right-wing media, he also has the whole mainstream media against him. So when he was president, they were constantly doing the opposite of promoting his message. Whereas the Biden administration had the mainstream media kind of in lockstep, and so they would really parrot his narratives, like all the silly ones, like inflation is transitory, there is no border crisis, nothing to see here, until it got so bad they had to admit it eventually. But if one of the two has more of a propagandistic grip on the media, it's Biden and the Democrats. Though even them, it's still a free press. It's not like a government-controlled media like they have in Wicked. So it's not super applicable in either direction, but it's definitely not the case with Trump, where you have an incredibly oppositional media, and to some extent, I do think that's a good thing. Now, none of this is saying that Trump doesn't have any authoritarian tendencies. I think he does, or that there's nothing in the movie that could serve as some sort of comparison or warning to things about Trump. I do think Trump scapegoats groups of people sometimes, or just groups, like the animals are scapegoated in Wicked. You can see this with the way that he talks about immigration, sometimes collectivizing or talking about all or most immigrants as if they're the problem, rather than just the ones who do come and commit crimes and are a bad influence and should be deported. He often casts with far too broad a brush when it comes to his rhetoric about immigration and immigrants. But Biden and Democrats all the time categorize and scapegoat groups of people, whether it's them blaming the unvaccinated for the continuation of the pandemic, casting all Trump supporters as evil, racist bigots, or even like blaming Facebook for killing people during the pandemic. All politicians and political sides do scapegoating. It's just a thing, and it's not a uniquely partisan phenomenon. So this lady's whole take on Wicked makes very little sense to me and just comes off as hyper-partisan and tribalistic and frankly kind of unhinged. But of course, the comment section just ate this up uncritically. One person wrote, "I cried during Defying Gravity because of the election. 100% agree with you." You should probably be a little bit embarrassed about that and the lack of mental resilience that it demonstrates, not proudly boasting about it on TikTok, babe. Another person says, even deeper, it's about the conflict between what we call good and evil, or masculine, light versus feminine, dark, which also played out in the election. This is all very deep stuff. Yeah, you're gonna need to put down the crack pipe, babe, because you've had enough. You're reading in a little too deep into that one. It's not about masculine versus feminine. That is not a theme in Wicked. The two main characters who represent the two different paths and approaches are both females and feminine. Also, these takes are so wild, coming from the crowd that doesn't think gender is real or exists. Another person wrote, going on the 5th with my family. My sister is a trumpeter. It's gonna be an awkward lunch after. I mean, it really doesn't need to be unless you make it so by being obnoxious or annoying about it. Like, you should just be able to enjoy a musical movie and talk about it with your family without injecting politics into it. And if you can't, the problem might be you. All in all, I liked the Wicked movie. I thought it was pretty good. I didn't think it was like the best thing I've ever seen. But I find the woke hysteria around it, from the TikTok discourse to the cringe-inducing interviews with Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo, to the stupid trigger warning that was attached to it and so much more, actually frustrating on multiple levels, not just because I disagree with it on the merits, but also because it's like distracting from and discrediting from what was not a super woke movie and was, I thought, a pretty good movie and a pretty good piece of art. It's like they're doing their own cause, their beloved Wicked, a disservice by attaching all this nonsense to it and politicizing it far beyond the broad political themes that are actually appropriate and incorporated into the work, and just making it a partisan, tribalistic thing when it's not actually that. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below.